What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Inflow Experience, a strategic podcast for unified communications and contact center success and some other fun stuff. I'm Tarek Sabosic, your Inflow CSM. Shout out to all my customers and clients, and also host of this podcast. Today is day one, episode one, and what better way to kick it off than to bring on the biggest gun that we can find, Mike Dolloff. Sir, how you doing? How's it going? How you been?
Good, good. Truthfully, was I planned C or D?
Well, if we're gonna be truthful here,
Oh boy.
you were
Don't be that truthful.
you were A plan. You were A plan. Let's put it that way.
Okay, good.
Um,
Good. I'm A plan. Well, I'm honored to be on and really glad to be kicking off this series with you, man. And yeah, this is
it's been
excellent.
it's been a long time coming. We've been planning this for a while, so I'm happy that's finally come to fruition. Before we kind of get diving into it and kind of covering topics, etc. Why don't you give us a little bit about yourself? I mean, I know who you are, but the rest of the world obviously does not. I know you're a big time star in the UCAS, CCAS landscape, but across the spectrum, we still want people to know. So give us a little introduction, and then we
Sure,
can go from
sure.
there.
Yeah, for like the few people who probably don't know who I am, I'll give an intro for sure. Now, I'm Mike Dolloff. I am Chief Revenue Officer at Inflow Communications. I've been here about 6 years. I've been actually in the IT services, UC contact center space for about, I think 15 years now. And yeah, I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I absolutely enjoy talking around technology and communications with businesses. It's true. That sounds as nerdy as it sounds. That's actually I really do enjoy that part. But outside of work, I live in a beautiful place in the world, and so I get to go outside and do lots of fun things. I love to run and bike. I've got a family, got 4 boys, so Tarek most of the time doesn't see or hear them on calls we're on together for work, fortunately. But yeah, I've been I love where I live, love my family, grateful to have so many wonderful people in my life.
So you brought up there that first little part about biking, and we all here at Inflow know about Mike and his biking. When Mike
Hmm.
asks you to go on a bike ride, it's not like your envisioned bike ride where you think, oh, we'll kill 15, 20 minutes. It's actually like 3 or 4 hours, and you go on like a jaunting multi-mile bike ride, and it kind of gets pretty crazy. In which afterwards you probably go on a walk. So very active for the most part. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
But it's good stuff. Tell me a little bit about sort of how you got to Inflow, kind of what you did before that, and then all around in there.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I started out. I graduated from University of California, Davis, UC Davis, and I was looking for my first job, and I found a job for as sort of like an inside sales rep for a technology services company, and that I was like I didn't want anything to do with sales or technology up until
Wow.
that point, but I was like, hey, I'm a guy who just finished college, and it's actually this is right around the Great Recession time frame too. So jobs are like slimmer pickings, and I was like, hey, this looks like a good job, and I'm going to take this job. So I jumped into it, and where I really gravitated for, I actually enjoyed I had a complete, like most people that probably didn't grow up saying I want to be in sales, had a complete misconception of what that was, right? Like you picture the the hey Shooter McGavin kind of thing,
Sure, sure.
I had that same misconception, and I realized, oh, this is actually a lot of stuff I like. It's communicating with people, it's problem solving, it's relationship building, and then you marry that piece of sales, which I was like, oh, okay, I dig that, with like the technology piece, and not technology for the sake of technology, but I actually was fortunate to work for a company that like looked at the whole IT spectrum of technology,
Hmm.
like a lot of stuff in there. But what I really gravitated towards initially, in fact, my first day my first real job, my first day, I remember I had to like write an RFP or respond to an RFP for a contact center,
Hmm.
and I could still remember everything about it because I was like, what's a contact center and what is all this stuff? But I started realizing, wow, this. So I understand the technology is to help solve all these business problems here for the contact center. Interesting. And so I got my hands like dirty for a number of years in that space, but I also got a good breadth of experience. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, I was like, I really like contact center a lot, and I want to find a company that's really focused on that. And so it just, you know, it just interesting. I'm in my own backyard in Portland, which is not a massive metro area. I was able to run into Travis and got to talk with him. And at the time, Inflow was like 15, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 people,
Hmm.
and I talked to him, and it's sort of his vision of, hey, we're really good because we're focused, and we're focused on unified communications, and then we're trying to figure out what else we want to be. And I was like, ooh, I think it should be contact center. And so I was able to. They were kind of going that path, but I was able to reinforce, like, hey, I think that's a great path to complement what you guys
Sure.
are doing really well. Yeah, and so that was, six plus years ago now, where we kind of connected, and I started working here.
Gotcha. And so Travis being Travis Dillard, CEO, president, owner here at Inflow, um, tell me a little bit about sort of that last statement that you had about, you think that we should go contact center, and they were kind of already going down that path. Why that move? Why that thought? As kind of, if you can take me back to your thought process at that point, right? What was the thought process there, and kind of how did that unwind?
Yeah, well, I think, first off, their inflow at the time was unified communications, and when we say that, unified communications is obviously like the business communications. It's phone calls, it's messaging, it's video, it's collaboration, like meetings and things like that, right?
Hmm.
That that space Inflow was doing a really good job in, and that's why Inflow was successful. One of the reasons why they were successful at the time was they're really focused on that as the craft. And they were focused on that for a product called ShoreTel, which was bought
Hmm.
by Mitel, and you'd
Sure.
think of them as Mitel today, right? But they were focused on it with one product, and a lot of other players in the space would say, yeah, we're going to do some ShoreTel, but we're also going to do network and wireless and network security and all these other things. Inflow is like, no, no, we're really focused on this, and we're going to do it better than anybody. And that speaks to me because I was like, yeah, like I feel like I've been an inch deep and a mile wide in my knowledge. I really want to like focus to be an expert for people.
Hmm.
And Inflow was there from a company perspective, and Travis was like, but we're too narrow right
Hmm.
now. And I was like, no, I agree, right? You've got all your eggs in this basket, and you do need to. The company needs to be diversified some. But the thoughts at the time and sort of the common path that companies like Inflow would take would be there was two of them. One, it was like you become a managed service provider, like IT help desk and network server, go down that path where we can offer kind of a broader range of technology services. Or you went down a second path, which is you go and you become like a broader reseller of different technologies, right? Like, okay, we're going to do data center technologies now, wireless technologies now, and stuff like that. Those are the kind of the common paths. And that's actually the world I'd come from. And I was like, I can tell you two paths that I don't think are good ones, and that's those two. Um, and as Travis and the leadership team and we started talking more and more, it became very apparent that we were actually it was right in front of us, and it was contact center because we were already doing a lot of contact center. It was a subset of a lot of the customers we were working with, and we were comfortable with it, and we knew it, and it was actually just like, oh, we're already doing it. Let's just really focus more effort on it, right? We're already, and so I always describe for people sort of the evolution of Inflow over the last number of years has been Inflow was a UC company that did contact center. Inflow now is a contact center company in that customer experience space that also
Hmm.
does UC. That's really been the flip, has been that. And so that's really the thought process was a number of things though that I think are important to touch. But I'd say the main one is besides being single-threaded with a technology partner, we also saw that unified communications was going to have some level of commoditization, meaning there would be feature parity. ShoreTel hit the market, 15 years ago, and it was pretty disruptive. Wow, there's a lot of things it can do that other platforms can't do. VoIP, unified communications, right? Voice over IP was fairly new, and so it was a nascent market, and there's just a lot of opportunity to really like, wow, there's a lot of value to sell to
Hmm.
really help people adopt the technology. No, well, we saw that there's a lot of players entering this space, and it's becoming pretty even. There's not a lot of differentiation there. So where will we be able to add a lot of value going forward, being like consultative and being able to do professional services and being able to help really optimize the tech? It was like, oh, contact center. That barrier of entry in that space is actually a lot higher. A lot of people are scared of that from the technology partner side because it's not about speeds and feeds, and it's much more of a business conversation. So that was kind of the one of the other things, Tarek, that was like, not only are we already kind of doing this, but actually this is a really big and growing space that a lot of people are really afraid of, and we're not afraid of, and
Sure.
we have capabilities and skills in it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I like the point that you made. Kind of, where we started off is mainly a short tail shop, and kind of looking at where we are today, right? Kind of looked like a leap and bounds difference.
Yeah.
I know today, growth is good for any business, any industry, but especially ours. So being at, where we are currently, I know that we've expanded here shortly these last maybe 6 months or so. Some investments have come in from some very successful firms. Do you want to maybe touch a little bit on that and kind of give us the last 6 months as far as growth is concerned with Inflow, and then touch maybe a little bit on Peak View as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, we've Inflow has always been about like we grow. One of our one of the things we say internally is like, why not us? Right? We don't want to put ourselves in a box of we can only do this many things, or oh, we're only a Pacific Northwest company. No, like we don't want to put ourselves in those kinds of spots where we feel like, oh, we can only do these things. So we've always grown, like we've grown from this little regional player to a national player. We've made acquisitions of companies and customer bases over the years, a handful of them while I've been here, and even before my time here. But in the last couple of years, we realized, wow, we're really kind of getting to a growth point where organically we're only going to be able to go so far. And why not us to go bigger? Why not us to be somebody that becomes like a, we've got big aspirations. We'd love to be a brand that people recognize, right? Like as like, hey, this is a company that is really knows their stuff around customer experience. And so part of that was saying, how do we get there? And so we went out and ran a process to evaluate our options, and we ended up picking a private equity partner called Renovis Capital. They're based out of Philadelphia. That's a smaller, agile group that really sort of aligns with us, I think, from a culture, people perspective, really well. But they invest in tech-enabled services companies, of course, which we are. And so that was something we just wrapped up in December, and it's been exciting to have a team of a team that sort of supports our leadership team internally, a board and people that really know how to help continue growing businesses to this next level, right? So
Hmm.
we've got we got some backing from that to be able to help us grow. We've also got the ability to look at different ways to grow the business, not just organically through hiring and growing our team, but through acquisition. And so part of our part of the early part of our days here with Renovis is we found a company that just had a great synergetic fit to what we're doing, and the company's PeakView. And PeakView, we actually got introduced to them. I actually knew of them myself before, and I'd always sort of seen them, respected them, knew of them. But our private equity partner Renovis got introduced to them, trying to get a better sense of the landscape that
Hmm.
we were in. So kind of doing
Sure.
due diligence on Inflow effectively, and they're like, wow, you guys are really sharp, and this seems like really interesting. So we started talking kind of early in, while even Inflow and Renovis were still sort of finalizing our partnership. We started talking with PeakView, and the PeakView guys had just like I like what I'd like to say about them is, or what I share with people about them is, I think there's like two really big things from in my, and I'm not an expert, but my vantage point of like businesses working together from an M&A perspective. Like first is culture, right? Like is this like oil and water coming together, or is there alignment of philosophies and values and things like that, right?
Hmm.
Inflow is a people business. Like we are not making a widget, a physical widget or software,
Right.
right? We're delivering professional services, managed services, and so culture is like the piece, the intangible, if you will, that binds us all together to do way more than we could ever do if we were just, like this. It's like the sum of the parts thing, right? Like
Sure.
we're so much greater because of that. And PQ is the same thing. They're in a people business as well. And so I remember one of the early things, Adam Renner, who was the president at Peakview, now the president of Inflow, he he said I'd asked him a question about, like, there's lots of partners like you guys in the space. Why are you guys successful? What's one of the things you'd attribute it to? And he said, Mike, one of the things we attribute it to is we treat our partners, meaning like the technology partners, that we call them suppliers, manufacturers, you call them lots of things, but
Hmm.
the Genesis, the NICE, and Contact 59, et cetera, of the world. He said we treat them as a partnership. Like, they need to be able to win. They need to be treated with respect. And we just look sort of like the golden rule type of approach to it. And he said so many other people in our space just don't, right? They treat them like the doormat. They treat them like
Sure.
the enemy. And when he said that, I was like, yeah, these guys get it, right? Like, these guys get it. That's the same way we believe the same thing. And it's like the golden rule, and you get way farther in business by doing good unto other people. And
Right.
they had that philosophy. So that was the first part. The second part was just sort of the synergy between the companies, right? From a business level, it's like, okay, so cultural and vision of how we want to treat people, how we focus on the customer first, we're good there. And on the business side, it made a ton of sense. They're focused on more of the enterprise space. They had a really great process around a vendor-neutral consultative process for helping customers around the contact center technology.
Hmm.
And what they hadn't built out was everything we had, which was scale, like a company that could build the scale,
Hmm.
segmentation of roles, a deeper bench of people, and then also a services org. That was the one thing their customers would say, hey, we love you guys. You've been such great consultants. Can you guys provide managed services, or can you do this implementation? Can't do it. And so the joining of our forces now, opens us up to some of the great things they built, opens them up to all the capabilities we built and the scale. And so as a combined force, uh, you know, we're excited.
Gotcha. No, that sounds like a lot of good stuff, and I think we're all happy and excited here at Inflow to kind of see what comes of these next few months, and then obviously coming years as well. But growth is good, so I'm happy to hear that we're in a good spot as far as that is concerned. You did touch a little bit there. You mentioned partners, and I think anytime that word is sort of used in business, it can mean a bunch of different things, right?
Yeah.
So as far as our landscape is concerned, it's sort of what we do today. Talk a little bit about our partners and sort of how you view them and kind of where they help and how they play with Inflow.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple ways you could look at it, but just like start out with the basics, right? Most of the technology partners in the unified communications and contact center space, most of those technology companies go to market with a channel, right? And their channel can be like a single person shop that's just helping like refer business to them, to a company, billion-dollar plus companies that have deep technical capabilities, certifications, etc. Inflow's kind of in the middle of those extremes, I would say, but we're in that channel where we're working with these technology partners. This is what I like to liken it to, though. If you boil down what are the technology partners doing? They are at their core, they're software companies. That is what they're doing. That their value, their IP, if you will, the core amount of it is in the software they're creating around unified communications and contact center. Inflow, where we complement that, is if you boil down, well, what are we? We're not making the technology. We're actually doing the processes around helping guide a customer through evaluation of it, consulting around it, implementing it, and then optimizing the technology through managed services or other capabilities. So it's sort of the yin and yang, right? Like, we go together really nicely. I'm a peanut butter and jelly guy, so it's like we're the peanut butter and jelly together, right, in the sandwich. That's
Same
because
here. Same here.
you are okay. Good.
Yeah.
So by themselves they're good, but you really, in order to have that amazing meal, that PB and J on wheat bread, right? Like, wow, that's amazing. It's because it's a combination of all of it. So we really complement each other really well. And I would say some of the most successful partnerships we have, our technology partners are really enabling us to do what we do really well, and we're really allowing them to do what they do really well. Right? It's like, hey, we
Hmm.
got this part of it. We'll implement and we'll support customers and we'll take them through a process to get to this point. And then you guys keep focused on making world-class technology. We'll help get that into the market and help get the right fit for the companies that can benefit from it and help them benefit it.
Hmm.
So I would say it's a very symbiotic, great relationship in that regard. Is that what you're asking about with partnerships?
Yeah.
I just kind of went on the tangent
No,
there.
no, I think you nailed it on the head there, and it was really good, general summary of sort of how we interact with our partners and sort of how they play. One thing I wanted to get your thoughts on and kind of see where your mind's at as far as these, I would say probably last year and a half or so, maybe even 2 years. COVID has been quite the topic, right? I don't think that there's anyone or any industry in the world that wasn't affected. I think everyone at some point to a certain extent was affected. So what did that kind of do for first Inflow, right? How did that make our jobs, dailies or kind of what we do day to day, how'd that make it that different? And then sort of if you could touch on the industry as well, kind of what you see there.
Yeah, look, I think like everyone, right? This was like not what we envisioned 2020 to be like. From we actually had a company kickoff in late February, excuse me, of 2020, and the world felt pretty normal at that time. And then a couple weeks later, it was very much different. It was a different world completely, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, we feel it? Have we had adjustments? Absolutely. What I'll say is there's a couple things. Interestingly, as a company, is we've been virtual and remote always. So obviously, like you can't click into a newspaper website or look at like some news feed or whatever without seeing something about work from home these days, right?
Yep.
We've been doing that for a decade, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so from kind of a tactical day-to-day standpoint, it actually was probably very undisruptive to the Inflow employees as a whole, because we weren't like uprooting ourselves from the central office and going home and trying to figure out tech. Now, some of us had spouses or other roommates or other people that for them it was, and so our home office dynamic might have changed, and
Right.
certainly did for some people. I would say what was more apparent was from a day-to-day, it was helping our customers navigate that transition, right? Because now that's where the big change has been, is all of a sudden you had companies that were working in brick and mortar who were like, hey, look, I'm a call center, or hey, I'm a business that needs to communicate with my employees, and now we're all trying to figure out how to get home and work and be connected and effective in our jobs. And by the way, the world feels like an incredibly uncertain place at this point in time too. So set aside just the technology and stuff, it's like, we don't even know where this ball of dirt that we're on spinning out in the universe is headed right now, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
like I would say day to day, it became a real, like there was a massive wave in that kind of I think it was probably like mid to late March into kind of mid April into May even, of like companies just totally scrambling. Now I would say most of the people scrambling then weren't like, we need to go buy a brand new piece of tech and we need to rip out what we're doing and do something different. It was like, how do we adapt where we're at
Mm-hmm.
for this new reality, which is we've got people working from home and we just never set up for that, right? So it was like really a stress test of everyone's DR BCP kind of plans around IT, like, oh, what do we do? So I'd say from like a support perspective, we're helping customers, or some projects where they're like, we were going to do this, we need to do it right now, and how quickly can we get it done?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the immediate change. I feel like then there was a lull after that, of like, okay, what's going to happen from here? Is the economy just going to completely melt? Is this going to completely like devastate everything? And obviously it's been incredibly impactful.
Mm-hmm.
But there was so much, it's hard to remember now, right? But when you rewind in your mind, it's like it was so uncertain, like going into the summer and what this would be. Is this like going to be weeks or months, or no one had any real idea of it. So I would say, it was a crazy first couple months of just like for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, we were extra busy more than anything. I think like a lot of organizations, we've adapted and adjusted. We traveled almost none last year, right?
Right.
Like things like that. But if you look at what did it do to Inflow, I would say it stress tested us a little bit in areas
Mm-hmm.
where where we perfectly aligned with our customers in certain areas where we could help them. Were there areas where we could improve with support? Um, how tight were our relationships with our suppliers? It stress tested us in good areas there, and we passed the test. I feel like it was a
Mm-hmm.
good exercise of that. What I would say it did for a lot of customers and for the industry around UC and contact center is I feel like it kind of fast forwarded a lot of things, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years for organizations,
Mm-hmm.
right? Around the UC contact center conversation. So for some, in the last 12 months since COVID hit, they've like said, hey, we're going to move from a prem solution to a cloud solution, or hey, we're going to do this digital transformation, the new buzzword around stuff, right? We're going to accelerate this portion of our digital transformation. So I feel like it was kind of a time warp for a lot of orgs. The way I think of it is, I don't know, somebody somewhere, some creative meme maker put one together that said that's like, what was responsible for digital transformation in your company, and it's like A, B, C, or D. It's like your CEO, your CTO, or COVID-19, right? And it's like, yeah, COVID-19 was the driver for digital transformation.
Select that one, please.
Yes. Not to make light of like obviously what's an incredibly impactful thing, but I think there's the business side of it, there's a lot of truth to that's really driven a lot of different thoughts of how technology. And if somebody goes, well, Mike, what do you mean? It's like, look no further than you can ask your parents and you can ask your grandparents, do you know what Zoom is? And like 95% of them would say, yeah, of course I do. Before COVID, would any of them know? No. I knew what it was. You knew what it was. But just to get that concept of, that is unified communications technology, right? And it's become a household name. It's it's like one of these things that, it's like saying Coke, right? Like people know, Zoom, Coke, right? Like,
So. Yeah, they no longer say that they have a video meeting. They're on a Zoom call, right? That's how they've adapted to it, and it makes a lot of sense. So you touched there a little bit about sort of understanding where you're at today as a company, and by companies I mean customers and how they interact with their clients and kind of how they go forward with that. So talk to me a little bit about what it means today to be on-prem, have an on-premise system, and what it means, what it looks like today to move to the cloud, and why we should be looking at that a little bit harder than we are.
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually writing a blog right now on this because I think it's a really interesting topic. There's been a migration for technology to cloud for 2 decades now, right? Like the early 2000s, Salesforce, right? And, like this concept of software as a service is not new. It's now 2 decades in almost, but what's interesting is it has not had that same level of adoption acceleration on the UC and contact center side over those 20 years as it has maybe for like CRM. I always give the CRM kind of UC comment. I think that's a good example because if you think of CRM system, for most organizations, not all, you would never think of putting in a premise-based CRM system. This. And nor would you even 5 years ago, right? For the most part. And again, it's generalization. There certainly are prem CRM systems out there, but like from a like percentages perspective, almost all of that's been in the cloud for a number of years. Now, if you think the UC and contact center space, it's been a lot slower of a progression to that point. So most customers out there are actually on a premise UC or contact center solution. But interestingly, the focus on the market, so from the supplier side, the technology side, is they've all shifted almost all of their focus for the product into the cloud. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect, actually, of there's a lot of companies that aren't there and aren't going to be there in the next year or two to go to cloud, but their hands being forced, I think, a bit because the technology really is not being innovated for their prem anymore.
Sure.
So I think it's even earlier than where people want to go in a lot of cases. So we could sit and say that's a shame. But if you pull back and understand why, it's because the reality is I think it is going to go there, and all the companies, all the suppliers are going to focus their effort there. It makes sense. Their value as a business gets multiples higher when they have reoccurring revenue. Like there's all sorts of very logical reasons for it. But I think there is a bit of a disconnect there on. So where it leaves customers is really an interesting spot. So as part of like my blog topic is around this is like, I think that's part of like the Inflow story is like, hey, we can help companies where they're at right now, and of course we can help them with a prem solution, but we're not foolish. A lot of them will want to look at cloud, and we hope that we can help them, guide them on that process, and then once they're on cloud, help them optimize that. But I think there's a need, right, for that. We feel like we're filling a bit of a void there, which is a lot of companies are just like cloud, 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 and we are too. That's where a lot of the stuff's going. But you're ignoring that like 80% of the market isn't there yet. And
Right.
so, how do you help them? Maybe they need help right now where they're at, and then help
Mhm.
them journey in that journey. So I would say that's. But I do think realistically that a good portion of these companies are going to make that transition to UCaaS and to CCaaS over the next couple of years. Not all of them, not
Sure.
all of them for sure, but I think a good majority of them will. And but we're not. You hear the marketing, you hear the messaging, you talk to the analysts, it would make it seem like, wow, we're like this is like, and it's going fast, but it's
Mhm.
still there's a whole lot of the market that hasn't made that shift yet.
So what would you say to that, let's say if ballpark number 80% of the market, right, that still hasn't made that shift. What would you say to those IT managers and, to those legacy users as far as, you got time, right? This isn't something that we got to get done tomorrow. But what would your, I guess what would your feedback be to them on sort of why they should be making a serious thought or serious effort today to move as fast as they can? Or would you tell them, hey, it's still a valued and available product today, meaning on premise. Kind of what are your thoughts on that, and how would you kind of, give them advice if you could?
Sure. Well, I think you're always going to have this like spread around the leaders and the laggards in this space, right? And I would
Hmm.
say it's not. I think we're beyond. It's just being the early adopter leaders going to cloud for sure. Like we're beyond that. So if
Okay.
you're like, well, we're not an early adopter, well, don't worry. The people going to cloud right now aren't either, right? So
Right.
you're not first there. So I would say, in the context of we're definitely in that space now where it's like the majority of people are probably going to be comfortable, right? And then there'll be the laggards that'll never come along, or some will come along in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? Kind of
Hmm.
thing. What I would say is, I'm just not a fan of technology for the sake of technology. But what I'll tell you is this: like some of the really I think important themes we see over and over talking with IT is um, our users are more distributed now. COVID, right? Work from home. Our users have lots of applications that they're managing.
Hmm.
Um, our businesses is in a lot of industries growing, right? We just saw the job report too, like the U.S. added a bunch of jobs in March,
Hmm.
right? Like almost 1 million new jobs added. Not that the economy is up and down, but the idea is a lot of businesses, some are struggling mightily from COVID for sure, but there are a lot of businesses that are doing well. What we've consistently have seen, and I've seen this since the Great Recession, we have not seen technical staff in organizations, IT namely, grow at the same pace that the headcount for the organization has. Meaning they're just not adding IT resources at the same pace. So one of the things I think an IT leader needs to think about is, what am I going to do with the finite resources I have? And is there a benefit to my bit? So I think it's part of it's like, what's the benefit to the business, like
Hmm.
tools, feature functionality, but what's also what am I going to be able to focus my energy and attention on from my staff perspective? Is it good for them to spend time, managing a data center of our own, or should we look at getting some of that out? Now, I think it's grossly oversimplifying if we say getting it out of their own data center means they don't have any headaches. That's not the case,
Sure.
but there's different level of work involved and maybe different skill sets involved.
Hmm.
But I'd say one of the things that really I think really companies that are really accelerating their businesses have done well is figure out how to help IT be a part of the strategic solution
Hmm.
of their business, how to differentiate their business instead of just being like the power company that keeps the lights on.
Hmm.
What can I do to help IT do to help innovate and evolve the business? And in a lot of cases, getting some of the more mundane or some of the things off the plate that aren't really adding value to the business that are just keeping the lights on.
Hmm.
Um, Taking that effort off of IT's plate can be a good thing. So I would say it's like, what can this do for the business? What can this do for the users, like the internal users?
Hmm.
And then what can this do for the finite resources I have in IT to help facilitate the growth of the company?
Sure. No, those are a lot of great thoughts and a lot of great points. And I think, the more that you kind of, give this sort of bigger, broader picture of kind of the landscape and sort of where we play into it and sort of how Inflow views the landscape, I think the more that you kind of realize, whatever it is that could be done as far as alleviating or supporting or helping, we're going to try and do the best that we can. And I think a lot of companies are kind of in that same space of we're kind of rolling with the punches as times go as far as COVID is concerned. But I think as we kind of come back to what quote unquote normalcy would be, and I don't know what that looks like, whether that's in 3 months, 6 months, a year. Do you think that this is going to return, or maybe is it going to bring more folks to the plate as far as the UCAS CCAS landscape? Is it going to frighten people away because hey, we've kind of cooled off on it? It's no longer that big of a rush concern as far as remote work is concerned. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, yeah, it's interesting. I haven't put a ton of thought into what I well,
I
my
guess what
my
does normal look, right? What does normal look like after this is the question, I guess, what
yeah.
I'm trying to get to.
I think things continue. I actually think things pick up a little bit from a cloud migration standpoint, to be honest
Okay.
with you. I think they've accelerated some. We've seen this year over year accelerate, but I think the reason some companies are holding back right now is because, and understandably so, because of economic uncertainty, maybe in their
Mhm.
industry or the broader economy. And that's one of the beauties of having a prem system is it's largely an asset that you own, right? And so
Mhm.
there's maybe an annual maintenance cost, managed services cost or something, but it's not you're not you're not it's mostly quote unquote paid for, right? And so
Mhm.
I think you have a good portion of businesses that are nervous and waiting. Maybe they've had cash flow hits or other financial hits from COVID that they're wanting to rebuild and recuperate and feel comfortable from before they may move. So I think if whatever normal looks like as far as some level of comfort, the economy comes back to some level of strength, then
Mhm.
I think you see a lot of companies say, okay, we really need to get our stuff together and we need to have a better plan and we needed to make this change now. How do we do it, right? And
Right.
so I think a lot of the conversations we're seeing now is planting a lot of seeds and helping a lot of companies do that. And we're
Mhm.
certainly helping a lot of them take action on that now too. But I think you get this sort of thawing effect that happens once things warm up a little bit to
Mhm.
normalcy.
That makes a lot of sense. I think one of the things about, really sort of talking with anyone sort of in your position, right, with the experience that you have and the passion that you bring to the space, what makes you tick, man? I know we've talked a lot about we've talked a lot about the industry and we've talked a lot about telephony and what makes you tick? Why do you get up in the morning? Why do you do what you do?
Uh, get up in the morning because I have kids who wake me up early. Truthfully,
Fair.
no, I mean, what makes me tick? I would say I love solving problems, and I feel like I'm in a space where I get to help solve a lot of problems and I'm in a great spot where we do it as a company. We help solve a lot of business problems, and
Uh-huh.
I love that. I was not one of these guys who grew up and said, I know what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be X and Y. I want to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, an athlete, or whatever. I mean, yeah, I did actually want to play professional soccer, but that's a story for a different day, and clearly didn't work out. But beyond those um, false illusions that I had of playing soccer professionally, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I love that I get to solve problems every day, and for businesses, like I love the mechanics of a business, how they make money, and how do they help differentiate their business, how do they go to market, and with unified communications, but even more so contact center and customer engagement technologies,
Mhm.
we are helping businesses in a spot that's incredibly critical. So for me personally, I would say at a business level, it's that.
Mhm.
At a personal individual level of what I do in the company, I would say it's working with great teammates that I get to help them elevate themselves, right? Try to
Mhm.
help them elevate themselves, and they started it here and they're getting better and better in their ability to be an enterprise salesperson or be a customer success person or be um, an operations person. So that like I love that. I love being
Mhm.
able to again because I'm old and not an athlete. I'm not a professional athlete. I missed the mark on that.
Uh-huh.
Um, this is this is like my team now, right? And I love
Right.
having the ability to like be a part of a team and lift one another up and get better and practice and improve. And so I would say that's the other piece of it that makes me take. Now, outside of that is I've got a family. Like that's the work side. The outside of that is what makes me tick. Is I love spending time with my family. Love
Hmm.
spending time outside. Um, I just love I love the Northwest. So I love getting out, and I like fishing. I like biking. I like running. So being able to be outside, like
Gotcha.
which thankfully, at least where I've lived, COVID hasn't put as big of a damper on that as it has in other places. Like I've been able to get out and do those things carefully. Thank goodness, because that was really kind of like my
Sure.
sanity in the last year.
No, that's all great stuff. And you kind of preferenced there. You said you weren't an athlete, so you associate yourself as an athlete still, then, correct?
I like to think I have some level of athletic ability, yes, but
Fair
no,
enough.
I mean I'm a weekend warrior, right? Like that, but it's like I've got kids who are active, and so it's I got to be athletic enough to keep up with them, chasing them on their bikes and
Yep.
their events and all that stuff. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
What would you tell someone sort of, let's say, if you can go back and talk to Mike Dolloff at 22, 23, what would you tell him, about the industry today if for example, someone that age wanted to jump in and be a part of our industry or maybe even work for an inflow, advice would you pass to them? What would you tell them it's like? Would you advise it? Would you tell them to go elsewhere? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, interesting. I would let's see, what would I say? I would say is it's a great space to work in if you like. I mean, I think within our space that you can be very technical, you can be
Uh-huh.
very operation minded, you can be relationship. Obviously, there's sales careers, there's lots of things. So I think it's a very expansive space for people that are still trying to figure out what they want to be. Kind
Hmm.
of pigeonholed into certain roles. You know, and so I think for somebody who's like trying to find their way in life as a 22-year-old I was,
Hmm.
I think that's an important draw, I guess, to the space. I would say also it's an interesting blend of I always tell people we talk with people about business, operations, and technology and connecting those dots. That's what I get to do,
Hmm.
sort of boil down, and I love that. And so if people like those things, solving problems, I think this is a good space to be in. Um, but I would say if you are more inclined to be, this is a space that changes all the time.
Hmm.
So if you like things to just be figured out and sorted out and clean and neat every day,
I'll tell
I
you right
mean,
now, from my position, that's not going to happen.
exactly. So, this is a very dynamic space, right? Which is
Sure.
great, but it also for some people can drive them nuts because it's just like, you're never gonna have to figure it all out. There's
Right.
and even if you're like, wow, we've made an infallible plan, this is like perfect, we're in the perfect spot as a business or whatever, something comes and disrupts it, right? So
Right.
you have to live on this edge of constant change, and some to a degree controlled chaos, and so that can probably be an attractant or a repellent for certain people, the 22-year-old, right?
Right.
But for me, it's been really great. I don't feel like I'm stagnant or bored. This space is constantly changing, and the players are changing, and our ability to add value in the market changes, and we need to be flexible. I like that, but I
Hmm.
get that for other people that would be not a very good thing. So
Sure. No, and I think that that's really good insight from someone in your position today. One last thing I'll ask you is, a lot of the times when, we get on calls with customers and even partners at a certain point, there's always that sense of gratification, right, and gratitude that you have to be able to help someone in a time of need, right? And usually when customers come to us or even partners come to us, they're that time of need, right? So what would you say to, as far as the partnerships coming back and kind of getting round up again. Will there be somewhere down the line like an all covering hood of a one-stop shop go? Will we ever reach that in the industry where I don't have to go to a VAR and then a manufacturer, or are we going to get that one-stop shop?
it's a great question that I think about all the time. I think in a utopia, yeah, but I think in reality, it's what like my business. One of the great business lessons I've learned over the last number of years in Inflow is, um, for a lot of businesses, in order to be really good, you have to be pretty focused. Now,
Hmm.
there's exceptions to that rule for sure, right? But for a lot of business, I think the path to mediocrity is being diluted. It's being you're having your hand in too many pots. You've got too many things that you're doing okay, but you're not doing great at. You're not focused.
Sure.
So I would say, I don't know. I think the jury's out on that. I think to some degree there'll always be a natural progression of there's a broader ecosystem of need, like meaning like service part providers and technology providers. As a market is more immature, and as it matures, I think they're able to get some level of that coming together closer.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in the UC space that's probably farther along that journey. In the contact center, it's not, and there's a
Sure.
huge right now the arms race, if you will, is around these service provider technology providers trying to evolve their products into they're trying to one up each other in omni-channel this and AI that, right? And so they're really focused in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a massive gap in the market that we feel around the services side. Over time, as the products, sort of mature as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
will that diminish? Maybe, maybe. But I think then the next thing has come along, and if
Right.
Inflow has done a good job, the next piece of that, right? Maybe it's ecosystem pieces around the contact center, conversational AI, and these things. The need is now there more for services and enablement side. So I'm not worried for job security. I'm not too worried for the next while. But what I would say is I think there's an evolution of maturity model that you could say for these things that probably you could see changing over time for sure.
Sure. No, it makes a lot of good points there. Um, Mike, I want to take the time. Thank you today, man. First episode that we've had. I think it went really well. What were your thoughts on the podcast? Anything that you would change? Any feedback? Anything like that?
Um, I loved it. I think it was great. So except for me, it was good. So too bad that
No,
I spoke 70% of the time.
no, that's the whole point, right? What would the point be if they came and wanted to hear me talk every time, right? It doesn't make much sense. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the time today, my friend. We will chat later. For everyone else out there, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us. We'll be putting out podcasts hopefully every Friday. I think that's going to be the goal. But yeah, like, subscribe, make sure you're in tune, and take care.
All right. Thanks for having me, Tarek.
Later.